Hi.
Hello. I don't know why my video's not here. Hold on one second.
Yeah, for some reason, it's
Oh,
always been the case with the past few
oh,
videos.
hi.
Oh my goodness, it's so nice to meet you.
You as well. Thank you so much for having me on your your show and your TikTok. Sorry, I'm doing the little adjustments right now.
No, it's
There we
okay.
go.
But before anything else, everything's okay?
Sorry.
There was a tornado. Everything's okay?
Yes. So for us, everything was okay, but there was a small town in Oklahoma that got destroyed pretty bad. And this is tornado season right now in Oklahoma. And so actually last night there was more tornado warnings until 10 p.m. And the sirens, they just kept coming on and then going off, coming on, going off. So it was really scary last night as well.
But everything's not as bad as it was.
No, we're okay. Our area is okay. There was one person near us whose roof of their home got torn off. So sometimes you just never know.
I know. It's really crazy. Guys, this interview was supposed to happen 2 weeks ago.
Yes, but it was canceled due to a tornado. Due to a tornado.
It's really crazy, but for me, like it's such an honor that
No, I feel honored you asked me to join you in an interview, so thank you.
okay, like before we actually start with the interview, I just want to do like a backstory, like how Kristen is here. I think this was like sometime like second week of April or third week of last month. I saw her post on my news feed. It popped up on my Facebook news feed, and I was like, man, this girl is so inspiring. Like she's all Caucasian and everything, and she's like speaking. Hello, everybody.
Hi,
See,
everyone.
I saw Kimidora. Kimidora actually commented on your singing video. I saw it like
Oh, okay. Wow.
I know. All right. Hi, my name is Jenny. This is my voice, Clean Catch Voice, and we have a very special guest, and it's such an honor that she's here. She came through. Kristen,
Thank you so much for having me.
kindly introduce yourself to us.
So my name is Kristen Eve. First name Kristen, middle name Eve. But as my online persona and my persona as a musician, I go by Kristen Eve.
Okay. I'm sure a lot of people are really wanting to know the story. How did you guys? I'm just gonna like try to like lay it out as
Right.
good as possible that I can do it because you're Caucasian and you lived in the Philippines, in Davao.
Yes.
How did that go about? Naunsa siya nga naabot mo sa Davao?
So at first, or gusto ka magtubag ko in Bisaya or English, or do you want me to switch back and forth?
'Cause
English?
yeah, because I see like Caucasian people there.
Perfect. Okay. So at first, it's kind of funny because when you asked me to join you in an interview and you said, is there any questions, that you kind of don't want to cover? My initial reaction usually when I get that question is to immediately say, oh, well, I don't really want to discuss, how I moved to the Philippines because of how heavy the question is and because there's no way to talk about it without talking about my father who's no longer in my life. However, the beautiful thing for me is that I have finally reached a place in my life However, the beautiful thing for me is that I have finally reached a place in my life where I feel more open to talk about it, especially now that I am more open to sharing, the harder, more dark part of my story, because I genuinely feel that it can help other people, but it's also helping me every time I talk about it. So I just want to give that sort of trigger warning first for anyone that there's really no way for me to answer this question without talking about the heavy part of my story because it does involve my father. So anyway, So I was born in 1992. A year later in 1993, I wasn't a year old yet. I was still 9 months old. My father moved us to the Philippines because he decided to be a missionary there. It's kind of always cringy for me to that I'm like, oh, I hate that I have to always say that part of the story because I personally don't believe in that kind of thing anymore. I've stepped away from it. Also because I've seen through him, I've seen how common it can be for white missionaries to go over there and do more harm than good. And I've seen the good and the bad from that. And so that's how it came to be. So we moved to Butuan and we lived there for 1 year. And that's where I celebrated my first birthday. Like every time I get a shout out from Butuan City, I'm like, oh, that's where I celebrated my first birthday. After that, we moved to Davao, where we would spend the next 13 years. So altogether, I lived in the Philippines for 14 years, and that's where I grew up.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me just add something about what you just said because, I mean, we all have privacy to protect, but I can kind of like relate to what you're talking about. I don't really want to dig into what you said because, you said what you said.
Right. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I graduated high school. It's a private school. It was owned by American missionaries.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of makes me wonder if your dad was part of that. I don't know.
I don't think he was part of any high school, but he started a church there. A lot of people always want me to say the name of the church. The reason I don't do that is because there's still so many people I know and that know me from there, the people I grew up with. So I don't want to like disrespect them and I don't want to invade their privacy. But yeah, there's like a lot of heavy stuff to do with that because the truth is, it was more the church and the dynamic he started. It was more like cult based. And a lot of people get shocked when I say that because they're like, wait, how could it be a cult if this? And I'm like, if you look up online, the signs of a cult and the different dynamics and the approaches they use, it's very, very similar to my upbringing and how he held the church in our household. So there was a lot of abuse and there was a lot of trauma, but it's taken me many, many years to, therapy, stuff like that, to process my trauma. And that's actually where TikTok came in and me starting to share my life in the Philippines. It proves how far I've come because there was a time in my life when I genuinely could not talk about it. And I couldn't even talk about growing up in the Philippines. So I've come so far in my healing and my healing journey that now I can share my life. I can share the culture I was raised in, and it brings me a lot of joy.
It's like I feel almost bad because that was like my
No,
first question.
no. Listen to me. I swear. I'm in such a better place now in my life that it's nice for me to be able to see this because there was a time in my life when I never thought this day would come when I could easily talk about it without crying, and talk about it in a way to help other people. So it's actually an honor for me to experience this right now to where you can ask this question and I'm like, yeah, let's talk about it. And I'm not even crying.
Okay, so when you started being here on the social media platforms, which app did you sign up first?
So actually, I had been, posting on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram for years, but there was never any kind of, cause I'm a singer, I'm a musician, I'm a songwriter. So that's kind of how that was more my focus. But I never really, because I was still in the phase of my life where I couldn't really talk about my upbringing in the Philippines because it was still so attached to trauma. So I hid that part of myself. And I also hid that part of myself because I was afraid of not being accepted. I thought people would be like, oh, you're just, and I do get those comments sometimes. It's called like Pinoy baiting where, people will say I'm that way. And I'm like, I'm just a third culture kid. I can't help that. Like I can't help that I'm a third culture kid. But so that's why I hid that side of myself. And then when I got on TikTok, one night I just decided to post a video of me speaking Bisaya. And the next day, that was the very first time in my life I went viral. My video went viral and I got all these Pinoy followers. I was so excited. And through that, I slowly gained the courage to share more of my life, my story, and speaking Bisaya. So even though I was posting on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook for years, everything took off on TikTok first.
Yeah, because I mean, look at me, and I'm sure a lot of people down here in the comment section can really relate to this. That what really drew us to you is your content when you were speaking in Bisaya, because it's like, sandali, ikaw ba yun ni ga istorya?
Oh, lagi for so many years, or not really so many years, but for a while, people thought I was lip syncing. Still, they wouldn't believe me, and I was like, I mean, I don't know how to prove it to you.
That was actually my first instinct. Like I'm like thinking, hold on, I think she's lip syncing.
Yeah, I get that a lot. It's funny.
But okay, so apart from speaking Bisaya, do you kind of know how to speak Tagalog as well?
Not really. I can understand a little bit, but I'm not fluent in Tagalog at all. I only speak Bisaya. I think people kind of get shocked when they hear that because they're like, wait, shouldn't you know both? But I think it's for two reasons. One, in the 90s and early 2000s in Davao, everybody around me at church, everybody I knew, my friends, we all spoke Bisaya. And then two, my mom homeschooled us, so we didn't go to public school. So I think that's the other reason that, I never had to use Tagalog.
Oh, okay. So here's the one thing that I'm sure, people have this question in their heads too. Like, obviously, you're Caucasian. You said that you lived in the Philippines for 14 years total, 1 year in Butuan and 13 years in Davao.
Mhm.
How is it that you never acquired like the accent? Like the
I,
Filipino, like I'm
yeah.
listening to you right now. I mean, I've seen your content. I'm like, wait, she still has that American accent. Like, how did you not lose it?
So this is kind of where it comes in about me being a third culture kid. I get this question a lot. Actually, people are very confused by it. Actually, just the other day I answered this question. It's the only thing I can say is it's because more than likely it's because I grew up with American parents in the home, and that's who I learned English from. So with third culture kids, our brains know how to code switch very fast. And so whoever we learned English from, whoever we grew up around regarding that, that's how we are. Our humor, our accent, our demeanor, our what am I trying to say? Like our little whips and stuff, it's from them. And then whatever I picked up from Bisaya speaking people, I just switched to that immediately, and that's how I am. So because my parents, were born and raised in Oklahoma, that's who I learned English from. We spoke English in the house. I just that's whose accent I got. And I think that's also why my American accent is a little it can be a little southern sometimes because my parents are from Oklahoma. So that's kind of funny to me because I grew up in the Philippines, but my American accent has a little southern twang to it. Yeah.
Okay, you did mention earlier that it took you a while to finally talk about it. What actually inspired you or encouraged you to finally do it?
Man, what a great question. I don't really know. I think I started posting on TikTok a little bit before the pandemic started in 2020. So I started posting on TikTok in like the end of 2019. And then as I posted on there more and more, I don't know if were you on TikTok back then in 2020?
Well, Clink Cash is like 2 years old. So,
So
like
TikTok
right in pandemic.
So sorry.
Right around the pandemic time, but it wasn't like the full on. I don't know when exactly, what month that exactly the pandemic.
I think it was like early 2020, like at the beginning. But so for a lot of people who don't know this, those of us who started on TikTok before it was a huge thing. It wasn't a big app yet. It wasn't the top app. The great thing about the app is it was so different back then. It wasn't like oversaturated. And so you felt like you could be more yourself and your videos would do really well, but it wasn't popular yet. So like a lot of people didn't know about it yet. And so when I joined, none of my family was on there. Nobody who knew me was on there. So I felt like I could share this other side of
It
me
was like
in
a
a
clean slate.
Yes, exactly. Like it was like this little safe
Yeah,
bubble
yeah.
because TikTok wasn't huge yet. It was just this little tiny little safe world. And I just started feeling more and more safe to share this other side of me and sort of play around with it and see how people would react. And it was so much fun.
Well, I remember it back then because my husband Greg, he was already using the app, the TikTok app, but it was all about like when I remember when we would take the kids to the park, they would sit there and use this funny filters, and I was like annoyed, like, what are you doing? That's so lame.
Yeah.
Was that what attracted you to TikTok, or was it more just like what you said, just to kind of like start something fresh?
So I think everybody's For You page even back then was different. Mine wasn't really like that. Like for a lot of people, TikTok back then was also known for just dances and stuff, dancing. My For You page was not like that. Mine was more people sharing their stories, just like this, like either laying in their bed or whatever, sharing their story, talking about different topics, deep topics, connecting in that way. And so I loved engaging with people like that, following their story on there, supporting them. And that's what encouraged me to start doing it. So I think even back then, my everybody's For You page kind of immediately adapted to who they were and what videos they were engaging in, because I really didn't have a lot of dancers, like dancing videos pop up on my FYP even back then because I just wasn't interested in it.
Okay, so you posted your first video on TikTok. You just said it went viral and everything. When did it, like, how long have you been on the TikTok app when it finally started leaking through your other social media platforms? Like, hey, she's already talking about this. Like, this is what her niche is on TikTok. And what was your followers' response on the other platforms?
That's a great question. So, TikTok started evolving very quickly once it started slowly blowing up throughout 2020. And what we noticed is once TikTok started to slowly become the number one app, it's what forced the other apps to copy them, basically. So prior to that, there was no Instagram Reels, there was no YouTube Shorts, there was no Reels on Facebook, nothing. And I always say it's kind of funny because the only reason I'm super successful on the other apps now, even though I was on there for years, is because of TikTok, because they had to adapt and copy TikTok in order to compete. And so because these other apps copied TikTok, I was able to start reposting some of my content on there and posting other content on there. So you asked how long it took. I'm not really sure. I noticed that slowly people would start to find me on Instagram and my followers would just start slowly going up on there. And also the more I took my content from TikTok and reposted it as an Instagram reel or on Facebook, that's also when my followers started growing on there. And it's actually interesting because at first I thought, oh, they're just coming from TikTok and following me on Instagram. But I did a poll after I reached over 100,000 followers on Instagram. I did a poll and found out that there's a lot of people on there who only watch me on Instagram and not on TikTok. So I thought that was very interesting as well.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying because there are some of our followers too who says that they don't want to be here on TikTok
Yes.
Rather just watch it on YouTube. And I thought it was kind of strange, but like we
Right.
all have like preference when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
what what space we want to be in. But let's talk about your being a musician. Like, who inspired you to, like started writing songs and started singing?
So, for me, I had musical inspirations. I definitely had idols. Like Celine Dion is my number one idol, always will be. But as far as being inspired to just start songwriting, I feel like it was meant to be in my life so much that it just came into my life naturally. It wasn't really like, oh, this person's doing it, I'm going to try it. It just started for me very naturally. When I was 13 years old, 12, 13 years old, my parents actually got my brother a guitar for his birthday, and they paid someone that we knew in the church to teach him guitar. Well, he never took to it. He just never bonded with it. And I took his guitar and started to learn how to play it. And it was like, the only way I can describe it is like fireworks went off inside of me. It just, the connection was immediately like this. I bonded with the guitar and immediately started writing songs. And so I actually would like lock myself in the bathroom and just sit on the floor and write songs and play guitar. And now looking back, I see that that was really my way of coping with a lot of stuff, trauma that I was going through, stress, and, just becoming a teenager. And so that's a lot. I coped in that way a lot and turned to music and writing music. And it's been such a beautiful thing for me because even though other passions and hobbies have come and gone in my life, songwriting has been the one constant. So from the time I started writing music at 13 in the Philippines, every single year since that age, I've written music. Like there's not been one year where I took a break. I've always had songwriting with me from then until now. I've never stopped writing. And it's my number one passion. I love writing in both languages. I write in English, I write in Bisaya. And it's been a slow process because obviously I'm an independent artist. So, there's been a lot of bumps in the road, and it's difficult when you don't have like the financial backing that, big artists do. And also just my journey with my health issues. There's been a lot of like hurdles and bumps in the road that have kept me from sharing my music the way that I want to. But it's coming along and I'm getting more and more ready to release more and more music.
So at 13, do you still remember the song, the very first song that you wrote?
um, I think it was a song, let me see. I cannot remember the title,
But
but it
was
was
it English or Bisaya?
it was in English. It was a song about how I needed God to like literally hold me in his hands and help me through, whatever thing I was going through. I can't remember the title. I'll have to dig it up somewhere. But it was something about that.
Most of the songs that you wrote, what's your inspiration when you write a song?
Um, my experiences, whatever I'm going through at the time, a lot of my songs are about mental health and um, going through dark times in your life. I have some songs written about relationships, past relationships, but definitely a lot of my experiences. Some of my music I will write as a storyteller, so it's not written from personal experience because I also like to storytell, but a lot of it is written like a lot of it was written during a hard time in my life, and it's the song that got me through that time. So there's like a lot of my own experiences and energy and love that I put into my music.
So, as hard as it is for me to ask you, okay, so you did mention something about your dad earlier. Are you at the point in your life right now where you could say, I forgive him? Or like, were you guys like, did you guys come to like a point in time where you're just like, you have like a sit down and you told him that, hey, whatever it was, and I don't want to know because you have your own privacy and everything. But from a hindsight, like, would you say that you have already gotten over everything that you thought hurt you based on what he did?
Um, as far as getting over it, the answer would definitely be no because the trauma is so deep. So because of the type of trauma it is, it actually was physical harm to me as a child. And so he is no longer in my life. He's a very, very dangerous person. And so it was not even an option to keep him in my life. And there's no way that I would be able to have a sit down with him because he is a narcissist and he's an abuser. So it would never be a situation where it'd be safe for me to have a sit down with him. And also because he's a narcissist, he would never arrive to a place in his life where he would own up to anything and apologize. Also, regarding like forgiveness, I went on such a long journey of deconstructing from religious abuse, and some of the messages that were told to me since I was a kid about, the pressure put on victims to stay silent or be forgiving or whatever. And all that does is allow the abusers to continue doing what they do, because you're not using your voice to say what you need to say. And so it's taken a lot of work, a lot of therapy, many, many, many years of it for me to get to a place where I'm like, I don't think forgiveness needs to be the number one priority. It actually needs to be just me learning how to love and protect myself. And in a sense, learning how to parent my inner child the way they needed to be protected and parented. And I've been able to learn how to do that. And through that, it's kind of like, I always say it's like I learned how to become a mother hen, where she puts the wings over her. I've learned how to do that with my inner child now. And now I know how to be so protective of her that I take that pressure off of her. And I'm like, you don't need to put that pressure on you to forgive or whatever. What you need to do is focus on freeing your voice, telling your story, and always keeping yourself safe first. And so, yeah, that's the best way I can like describe that journey.
It's really crazy because there's people who have asked me like, why Clean Cash Voice? And like, we are all here on the social media platforms, whether it be here on the TikTok app, Facebook, or wherever. But I feel like, like, we have our own voice to talk about why we are what we are. And like, when you hear people say something that's not so nice, or when you see something that was done by other people that wasn't really nice, and then this person would say, if only you could hear my story, you wouldn't be too hard on me.
Right.
Like, I get it. Like, we all have different stories, and it's really commendable what you have done, because it's something that I want to ask, but I don't want to like invade your privacy. But your story is kind of like, if only people have seen this Korean segue. There's this Korean TV series that I started watching, The Glory, and this girl was like bullied so much. I'm not done yet, but I understand what you're saying about forgiveness. It doesn't have to be like forced, because there are some things that was done to you that other people will never understand, why you can't just give that forgiveness to the other person. I get the whole thing about like, oh, you need to forgive so you can free yourself. But, like, listening what you just said about like, before anything else, before forgiving the person who really hurt you for years, you have to protect yourself first. And it's like, when we go through things that are really hurtful, I can only hope that it's something that we will use not as because we are also different from each other. There are some people who got hurt and then they want to inflict more pain to other people so they can understand what it feels like. But the way I see it with you, you're using it as a tool or like an experience that you wanna not let other people feel whatever it was that you felt when you were inflicted pain by the other person.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think too, because if, like you said, if someone could only see my life, and that's kind of how I think, if people only saw my life behind closed doors, they would understand that this trauma goes so much deeper than a lot of people could comprehend. And it, in order, like when you asked, have you like gotten over it? It's not something you can really get over because the trauma is so deep. And from what I've learned about trauma, the body remembers trauma, the body stores trauma in different parts of the body. And because of that, even now in adulthood, I still live with the effects of what was done to me. It's so much stuff that I actually want to write a book about my life and share it all in it with the details because it's so heavy. And I know that when people read it, they will be like, I can't believe she lived through all of that. Like that's how dark it is. And that's why for me, I always like to encourage survivors of abuse by saying, forget forgiveness. That is not the thing you need to pressure or worry about or stress about. Take care of yourself right now because trauma shows up in many different ways. It's affected many different areas of my life that I still live with to this day. And, I've been diagnosed with a lot of different things because of trauma. And so it's kind of like my focus is more about freeing my story from my body, from the places in my body that hold this trauma so that I can be free and not really necessarily the pressure to forgive and let go. It's so I work with a brain retraining coach and we've learned a lot together about somatic practices, which is working with the body to release trauma instead of working with the brain. Because for a lot of survivors, your brain is so loud that you're not ever going to make sense of anything. You're not going to be able to think your way through trauma. But if you work with the body and you use somatic practices to release the trauma that's stored in your body, it can be a much better practice and journey for healing yourself.
wow.
Yeah.
It's there's so much I could tell there's so much more to it. But
Yeah.
what about like what's your mom's role with all these things that took place years and years ago?
So she's very, very supportive of me. As soon as I told her what happened to me, I actually was 19 when I told her for the first time because it took me that many years to gain the courage to come out about it. Because when you grow up with a narcissist in your home and they train you to be quiet and they train you to keep their secrets, it really it doesn't matter to your brain when you move out of their house immediately. It's not like a switch goes on and you're like, okay, I'm ready to talk about everything. It's not like that at all. So it took me many years. But when I did, she believed me immediately. And she, it destroyed her. Like she cried all night and it's a heavy thing for her to carry too, but she has been very supportive ever since. And there's a lot of ways she has supported me through my mental health journey as well. And she's very supportive of me talking about it, sharing my story. She's also fluent in Bisaya, so she's supportive in those ways for me too. And yeah, I'm just very grateful to have that support from her.
Well, at least you found the courage to finally talk about it, and I'm sure I can only imagine like when you finally decided that oh I want to talk to my mom about this. That I'm sure there was like a reservation in your brain, like what if she doesn't believe me?
Right.
Did
Yeah.
that come across your head, or was it more like I'm really sure that my mom's gonna believe me?
I knew my mom would believe me. She's not really the type of person that would ever try to like silence me about something. But I think for any survivor, that is kind of the fear in the back of your mind because you were silenced for so many years and you were threatened to stay quiet. And so, it was kind of my fear. It still is a fear of mine no matter what I do. If I talk about it, if I share about it, if I write about it, there's always this kind of sabotaging voice in my head that came from that abuse and him that's like, tries to silence me or tell me that I'm, this or that. It just plants very ugly messages in my head. And so I have to work through that. But yeah, I think for any survivor, there's always kind of that voice in the back of your head that has that fear.
About at the Chris, when did she show up in your life? Like at what age?
So she moved in with us when we were very, very young. Actually not even sure how old I was because she moved in before I could even form, memories. Like I was that young. So I grew up with her in the home. I would have to guess I was I want to say maybe 2 or 3 years old, maybe when she moved in. Yeah. So she definitely helped raise me and my siblings.
All this time when she was already with you, with your family, like she never noticed anything? Or was it just like normalized kind of thing? Because I mean, obviously your dad was her boss.
All I can say is my dad did a very good job of keeping me afraid and keeping me quiet. It's something that I'll just have to share in my book of how he went about keeping me quiet, but he did a very good job of keeping me afraid and keeping me quiet. So no, my mom didn't know. My yaya didn't know. Also, there was another Filipina lady who lived with us. She wasn't my yaya or anything. She just lived with us because she moved from away from her family in order to work at the church that I grew up in. So she lived with us. I was very, very close with her as well. And actually, she only found out about what happened to me a few years ago, and she messaged me and said she stayed up all night crying because she couldn't believe that I went through that as a little kid. And she said it broke her heart that they had no idea I was going through that.
Okay, I don't want to forget this because it's really it's actually getting I'm getting goosebumps right now because when you think of the kind of person that you're describing how your dad was to you, it's almost like a narcissist ex-boyfriend. You're not exactly living with that person, but you lived with that person. If
Mhm.
there's some people right now who's watching who has that similar situation, like what can you tell them to survive that kind of situation?
So the first thing I want to say is to anyone going through the same thing, it's not your fault. There's nothing you did that would ever make it your fault, even if their voice, their shame, their guilt is put on you and it feels like it's yours to carry. It's not. It's not yours to carry. And it may take years to release that and for you to believe that it's not yours to carry, but it's not. Their shame, their guilt belongs to them. And one of the things that helped me the most is once once we moved from the Philippines and we moved back here to Oklahoma, my parents separated. He went to live with his parents. We stayed with my mom's mother, our grandmother. And immediately my brain, I guess because I finally felt safe that I wasn't under his roof anymore, his house, my brain finally felt safe enough to start processing the trauma. And it did that by giving me nightmares. So I would have nightmares every night. But now I understand that was my brain's way of processing the trauma. My advice is, and I know this is tough advice to give because I was in a situation where we couldn't afford therapy. So it took years before I could get a therapist. But if you can get therapy, if you can get help, try to get help. and also try to look for a trauma-informed therapist, not just any type of therapist, a trauma-informed therapist that knows how to help someone with deep-seated trauma. But also, what helped me a lot was journaling and slowly teaching myself that I can send the shame and the guilt back to those people, that it's not for me to carry it. I can send it back to them. And I've done that a lot through writing and journaling, and just basically continually repeating to myself, this does not belong to you. This shame and guilt that you're feeling, that you're carrying in your body, it belongs to them. And anytime also that you feel afraid to talk about that person or speak out about them, or if anytime there's someone that says, oh, you don't want to ruin their reputation, you tell yourself, if they didn't want their reputation ruined, they shouldn't have done that to me. And their shame belongs to them, and my story belongs to me, and I have a right to talk about it.
So when Ate Chris knew about what happened, what was her reaction?
Both her, Ati Chris and Ati Nining, both of them that live with us, they reached out to me, and they basically just said they were so sad that that happened to me, and it broke their heart. They both of them have stayed very loyal to my mom and me and my siblings. A lot of people, which has been kind of painful for me, most of the people I grew up with still,
It's almost like
I still stand with my father, because their mentality is, well, yes, he did all of this stuff, but if he didn't come to the Philippines and start this church, then I wouldn't be in this church, and I wouldn't, and so that's how they explain stuff away. And because I grew up in the Philippines, I'm very well versed on how little trauma is talked about in the Philippines and mental health. It's already so hard to talk about it here in the US, but it's 10 times harder in the Philippines. So yeah, that's been a kind of a difficult thing for me to navigate.
it's really crazy because based on what you're saying right now, I mean, I don't want to use the word hate because hate is such a powerful word, but it's almost like, why is it that it's the victim's fault when
Exactly.
things come out like this? It's almost like, okay, so there's always like a justification why this person did this or why this person said that. But when the victim comes out, like really expressing like what they feel, like all the trauma that they experienced based on everything that happened, it's almost like, oh, okay. Ay, okay ra na siya. Like, maka-move on ra na siya. More, everything's being downplayed. And
Mhm.
I really encourage you to write that book.
Yes.
Like if you it when you do come out with a book, I'll read, I'll buy one.
Oh, that touches my heart. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Because it's like there's so many things that obviously there are so many things that you don't want to talk about, like privacy wise and everything. But when you do come out with a book, I'm sure a lot of your followers would really want to purchase one.
That really means a lot to me. It's very encouraging for me, because that's kind of because of how deep my trauma is. Sometimes I struggle with like self-sabotage or negative voices in my head that'll be like, oh, no one cares, no one wants to hear about, it just says a lot of negative things to me. And so I struggle with self-sabotaging. Like if I start something, then I'll self-sabotage it. And so that's actually been one thing, is I've written parts of my book over the last few years. It takes so much time and energy, and I have to go very slow with it, especially the parts where I'm talking about the really, really, really bad things that happened to me, because I have to sit, write it. Sometimes I have to cry. Sometimes I'll relive it all. And so it's can be very scary for me, but also I'm really overwhelmed with the process of learning how to, like, should I reach out to a publisher? Should I self-publish? And then I start researching how to self-publish a book, and I get so overwhelmed, and I'm like, I can't do this. But yes, it's very encouraging to me what you said. So
Yeah, or
thank you.
you could do like I mean there's a lot of creators who started their own podcasts, you know, like in
Right.
like freely talk about it. I mean it's really all up to the person, like how slow the pace they want to take it. But yours is like years and years of trauma that you can't just like sit here like this interview. You can't just like sit
Exactly.
for an hour and you know like, oh, this is what happened and then I'm over it. It's
Exactly.
something that people will never really understand, like how deep the pain that it caused you. Oh my goodness. I actually didn't expect this because I mean from the very first question, I mean it's normal. Like, you know, like you lived in the Philippines, you're so fluent with Bisaya.
Mhm.
But now that you're back in Oklahoma, I want to ask you this. I mean, obviously, at that time, you were just a baby. There's no way that you could have influenced that decision when your parents decided to move to the Philippines. But knowing what you know now, would you have still chosen to live in the Philippines for 14 years?
I really love this question. It's a very beautiful question because it gives me an opportunity to talk about something I've learned, which is sometimes when we just can't make sense of, trauma or hardships in our life, there's never going to be an answer to the question why. I think a lot of us struggle with that. Why? I need answers. I need closure. Sometimes we will never get those things. And so something that can help is to say two things can be true at the same time. For me, that is one thing, my father should have never been a missionary in the Philippines. That can be true. But at the same time, it can be true that I love my life and growing up in the Philippines. I would never trade growing up in Bisaya culture. Now I'm tearing up because it, I love the Bisaya people that I grew up with and how they influenced me. And I have so much love and respect for them. And it shaped me as a person. And so in order to find that closure for myself, I had to give it to myself. And I did that by saying two things can be true at the same time. My father should have never been a missionary in the Philippines, but I still, I have no regrets about growing up in the Philippines, and I love and respect the Bisaya people and the Bisaya culture, and I'm so grateful. And I know that can be hard for people to come to that, but sometimes it's just not black and white. Sometimes two things can be true at the same time, and you know, it can't be undone what happened. And like you said, I had no choice. But through all the pain and the heartache, I can choose to find the beauty in it all. I can pick out all the beautiful things and then I can create something beautiful from that. And so that's what I focus on.
Yeah, I mean, it totally makes sense what you're saying because, like, when you are inflicted pain, it's not like you're choosing. Like, it's not like it's something that you decided. Like, hey, I'm accepting this. It's not
Yeah.
something that you're actually asking for. Okay, so now that you're back in Oklahoma and you were just a baby when you were in the Philippines, what's the difference? It's kind of like not a fair question because I'm gonna say like, what's the difference living, you know, in the Philippines versus where you are now back home in Oklahoma? Because I've seen your content, and I'm sure a lot of people can agree to this. Like, we really love how you're doing this content of like comparing like you know this the transportation, like the
Yeah.
difference when it comes to living in the Philippines because you're now back home as an adult.
Yeah.
So let's just, I guess we could just like put it that way. Like, what's the difference? Because you did spend some years of your adulthood in the Philippines. So I guess we could go with that. Like, what's the difference living in the Philippines and there in Oklahoma?
It's definitely very, very different. Not even just lifestyle wise, but environment wise, because it would be one thing to move from the Philippines to, let's say, California or Hawaii, but to move from the Philippines to Oklahoma, where there's no oceans, no beaches, everything's flat, there's no mountains.
Man,
It's
oh my
very,
God.
very different. And so I, I always find a way to make it funny in my videos, the culture shock, but in reality, it was really hard to adjust to. And it took me a long time. And so I missed the Philippines for a very, very long time because even just environmental wise, it was just so different. And, in the Philippines, we lived in the city. Here, it's like a lot more like, I don't even know how to describe it. I would have to like show it on video how different they are. And so, yeah, sometimes there's things that I really miss about the Philippines and it makes me lonely here in Oklahoma, but there's also some things in Oklahoma that I have come to love.
Have you ever been to different cities in the Philippines? Because I'm trying to understand what you're talking about. Because I know that Davao is like a really busy city. Back home in the Philippines, I'm from Bukidnon.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, so if you're gonna talk about like the difference of being living in a big city like Davao in the Philippines and now in Oklahoma, I'm thinking Oklahoma is like Bukidnon, and then Davao is Davao. Isn't it? Like, have you ever been to other
Yes. So
provinces?
I've been to many different places in the Philippines. I think I have a video where I listed them all, Sama, Boracay, Bohol, Jensan, Cagayan de Oro, places like that. So I've been to many, many, many places, and I will still say it can't really, even like the smaller places in the Philippines that aren't like big city life, it still can't really be compared to like places like Oklahoma because for one thing, it's still a tropical island. It's still this beautiful tropical island, whereas Oklahoma is just sort of just
Is it
like
like a city and then like a province kind of thing? Like
there's
comparison?
many cities here in Oklahoma, and obviously like the downtown area is very lively city. There's tall buildings, stuff like that. But everywhere else, it's not really like that. There's some places where there's a lot of stores and shops and there's malls and stuff like that. But then there's lots of country roads. There's lots of cattle ranches, stuff like that. So it's very different. And obviously the dirt here, Oklahoma is known for their red dirt. So it's this really red, dry clay type dirt. Whereas in the Philippines, it's not that way. So it's just so
Hot
different.
and humid. Is it humid there too?
Yes, it's very humid.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's kind of like in the Philippines then.
And I think it's like a different type of humidity. Because for one thing, this is another thing. When I was in the Philippines, my skin, my type of skin was oily. But then when I moved here to Oklahoma, my skin changed to dry skin. So I don't know, the climate is still so different, even though both can be humid.
That's really crazy. Okay, so I'm sure you've met a lot of people living, 14 years in the Philippines. And how do I put this? Um, okay, so when a Filipina like me come here in the US, pretty much like around 2 weeks, we will get hit with homesickness.
Hmm.
So I don't know, would you call it homesickness? Did you experience that when you got there in Oklahoma? Because pretty much your home was in the Philippines.
Yes, I did. When I say home, home to me is Davao because even though I wasn't born there, I still feel like a Davaoeño because I grew up there, and that's where all my formative years are, all my childhood memories, and that's where I developed as a person. So moving here, I felt homesick for a very long time. It actually took many years to sort of adjust here and like put down roots. So, as I built relationships with people, as I got new pets here, and, I came to love my pets and stuff like that, and I found places that I liked in Oklahoma, I was able to like put down those roots and find things that I loved here. But yes, for a very long time, I was so homesick, and it's such a strange, unique experience because I was born in Oklahoma, but
Exactly.
now it feels like a foreign place to me. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here.
I know, that's why I was like trying to put together the question because it's like, how do I do this? Like she was born not in the Philippines, but then she practically grew up in the Philippines. I know it's kind of like weird because then, you know, like with me, I started feeling homesick when I got here in California pretty much within a week.
Mm-hmm.
It was hard, like it was a really hard transition because I mean I've seen the movies, the American movies, but it's nothing like living here.
No, not at all.
When okay, so ever since you lived in the Philippines, you've never been here in the US.
No, we did visit a couple times. So when I was like 4 years old, my mother's father passed away. So we did have to come back for that. And then another time when I was, I think, 9 years old, we came back here to visit because I celebrated my, no, I was 8 years old. I celebrated my ninth birthday here in America. So there were times, a couple times that we did come back, but obviously we would go back home.
So during those visits, did you tell your parents like, "Hey, I prefer to live here," or was it more like you have no choice but obviously to go with where your parents would go?
Every single time we had to leave the Philippines to visit here, I cried so hard. I would cry on the plane. I didn't want to leave. Yeah, it's coming here. And then we would stay for a little bit and I would play with my cousins and stuff like that. And so then when we would leave to go back to the Philippines, I would cry, but it was mostly like crying that I'm leaving my cousins and stuff like that. Like because I had formed like a bond with them. Yeah. So that's what I would cry about. But once we would, get home, it felt like going home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually yours is like different. Like
Yeah, it's like swapped.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so when you guys finally decided to leave the Philippines, who was that person that you felt like I don't want to leave this person behind?
My yaya. Yeah, for sure.
Oh,
Yeah. And now that's why it was so hard to get the news that she passed away because my number one dream, yeah, she has passed away.
oh my
She
goodness.
she passed away in April on April 6th this year. So it that's why it was so, I don't even want to use the word heartbreaking. It was like a total shock to my nervous system because my number one goal was to build my music career, get enough money to go back and see her. That was like my goal. I prayed about it all the time. And so for that to be just ripped away from me, it's like now, I went through a time where I was like, well, what do I do with myself now? My number one goal has been taken away. Like, I don't know what to do. And so that's been kind of,
Rough for you.
it's been weird to adjust to that. Yeah. Because I mean, we obviously had many friends. We loved many people there, but she was our number one for me and my siblings because she helped raise us. She was like a second mother. So losing her is just like, I can't even describe it.
Wait, but how long have you been back home there in Oklahoma?
This, this year, I believe in June or July, it will be 17 years. It's been a very long time. Yeah.
And she just recently passed away.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
How did you find out about it?
Her family, so she had been admitted to the hospital. And so we were getting updates and we thought she was going to pull through. We were praying and all that. And then they updated us that she didn't make it.
Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
Ay, grabe.
grabe ka bugat.
Oo, lawom kaayo imong mga istorya murag daghan pagid kaayo ba pero
Naghanjit kaayo, yeah. Mao na gusto ko magsulat og libro kay dili ko maka-share sa kanang isa ka video, isa ka interview bugat kaya nga akong story og daghan kay mga traumas na agyan nako. Daghan jud kaayo nga kung naay magbasa sa akong libro, kinahanglan mo mag-take og breaks, magana mo ay kabugat. Yeah.
Ano ka? Ang imuhang istorya kay kanang perfect example yun ka sa kanang phrase bitaw nga ang life is your greatest teacher.
Yeah.
Kay kuan kay ka kanang daghan kaayo kanang kung sa kuan ba kanang ang imong mga istorya naagi buod ba naagi laman based pod sa imuhang naagian sa imong kinabuhi.
Tama.
Ugodan, may puzzle. Sorry. There. But you know what? Like, yeah, keep doing what you're doing, and I'm sure like writing songs, I'm sure it releases some of that stress. You know, like ang trauma nga imuhang na-experience sa imuhang life. And even with this brief conversation ngayong ani lang murag gusto ta kahulbuton diri sa camera then magchikahay ta diri sa sala because like as much as naamagoy point in time sa ato ang kinabuhi na you felt like you went through so much in your life, but then hearing other people's story, you're like, oh my goodness, sisiw ramanday kay tong ako ang trauma. And I can tell you that because we all have different stories, but yours is like, my goodness.
Yeah, sometimes I joke that it's my trauma buffet. You know, a buffet where everything's laid out. I call it a trauma buffet sometimes because sometimes there will be a person that went through, you know, and I don't like to compare traumas and say, oh, this one was worse. I don't like to do that. But sometimes there's a person who will write a book or a movie will be made about one trauma they went through. But I have so many multiple ones that I'm like, yeah, this is like a trauma buffet.
Mo lagi akong ingon nga ang ako ang own nga story sisiw ra kaayo kumpara sa imuha, not that we're comparing just like
Right.
that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really crazy because I was like thinking this is just like an interview and I would just like ask questions like how did you go about like being a Caucasian person all fluent in Bisaya, and then here we are. But okay, message for the people, actually for your followers, who has seen pretty much like bits and pieces, because it seems like you're really trying to transition to like slowly but surely they're gonna start to really get to know the deeper you. What's your message for them?
My message for them is first and foremost, thank you. Thank you for wanting to follow my life and my journey, because there was a time in my life when I was very isolated. You know, here in Oklahoma, I never left the house. I was just by myself in my room. And I always said, you know, I always used to pray, God, if you give me an audience to share my story, share my music, I promise I will always be someone that makes people feel less alone in their journey. And that's always been my goal, is to help people feel less alone, because I went through a season in my life where I felt very alone. So to have all of my followers now and to be able to connect with them and share with them, like it's literally an answer to prayer. So my message is just thank you. Thank you so much. And I do hope in the following months, the following years, to be able to share more of myself and to not let that voice self-sabotage me, and to keep sharing and to keep connecting with people.
Well, for me, I mean, this is the very first time that we're having this conversation. I really commend, like, what you're doing is so commendable. Like, it takes a lot of courage to finally talk about what you went through, whatever it was that you went through, and whatever it is that you're still dealing with after what you went through. But yeah, please write that book. You want to
I'll start typing.
But thank you so much for for giving me this opportunity to do this interview, and we want to see more from Kristen Eve.
I really appreciate that. I just want to say, when I got your first message, I was so surprised and I felt honored. And that's when I clicked on your page and I, saw your stuff. And I also appreciate that video you have pinned where you talk about what to expect from your interviews, because that helped me a lot to just know that, oh, this is sort of sort of just like a chill, easygoing interview where we just sort of trust the process and let it unfold. So that really helped too. And I just thank you so much for inviting me to do this.
Actually, Chai, he's right here on the comment section. Chai Licious, him and his husband they were actually the last ones that I interviewed last week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I did mention this to him that the Clean voice interview is not like, I can't prepare like list of questions because the questions may not be applicable for my guest.
Right.
And I want it to be as free flowing and I want it to be as comfortable as possible for my guest and also for myself.
Right. I get that. I feel like that happened today. Like, I feel like it just sort of naturally unfolded the way it was supposed to.
Yeah, because I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to talk about, or I didn't want to tackle things that weren't there. Like, I don't want to ask a question. Well, I kind of did that, but in a way, it wasn't really intention because it's like a normal question, like, "Hey,
Right.
how are you?" Like, speaking Bisaya. But thank you so much. I mean, this is so much fun, and hopefully we can do this again, I guess, somehow, like if you're open for it.
Definitely.
Maybe when you come up with a book, I can
Yes. Hey, you get the first exclusive interview. Yeah, I would love that. And honestly, I just want to say thank you too that you allowed me to sort of just be open and talk in a vulnerable way. I appreciate that because I'm so far into my healing journey now where I am more open to talk about it. Like I was saying to my boyfriend that sometimes I don't know how to sort of just make a short answer when someone asks me, why did you grow up? Why did you grow up in the Philippines? And he said, just say, oh, my parents traveled for work. And I was like, but that wouldn't be the truth.
But hey, say thank you to your boyfriend for, like talking with you about this interview. I actually talked to my husband about this too. In every single interview that I do here, I would look at the person's content just so I can have like a little bit of understanding who this person will be that I will be interviewing. But as much as possible, I just want to look at some videos because what's the sense of me asking questions if I already know?
Right. True. Yes. I agree.
Okay. Please do me this honor because I do this thing. You're the 20th person that I interviewed with Clink.
Wow.
Yeah, and I always do this. Please do me the honor because I always start with the interview with, "Hi, my name is Jenny. This is my voice, Clinkcash voice." Please do me the honor and do that, Kristen E.
Okay, so I say,
"Hi, my name is Kristen. And this is my voice," and then you can say whatever you want to say about yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
"Hi, my name is Kristen Eve, and this is my voice. And I'm so honored to be able to speak with all of you."
Thank you. Thank you so much. And please be very proud of yourself because even with just this 1 hour conversation, I can already tell that you've been through so much and you are so brave to
Thank you.
slowly but surely start letting people know what you went through. And I'm sure a lot of people can get something out of it to be like a better person.
Thank you. I deeply appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you sa lahat na, sa tanan nga nanood, everybody who engaged in the comment section. And we'll see you guys later. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you so much to all of you. I feel very honored. Thank you.
It's my honor. Thank you.